No one chooses how to die, but their deaths were just horrific in every respect. Not only do they have to see Lauren dying, she has to, it's just a terrible death.
In relation to the blood that was on your clothing, can you just show me where the blood was on your clothing, approximately?
It was on my sleeves, me pants, there's bits of it on my face, on my football jumper.
He then retrieves the bloody ropes used to tie her to the tree and returns to the car where Camilleri is waiting.
You did it.
I did it.
You killed him.
It's done.
Good. Let's go.
Beckett says that after the murder, he fell asleep as Camilleri drove back into New South Wales, heading for their homes in Yass. They stop in Canberra on the way to burn their clothes and the ropes, and to throw their knives into Lake Burley-Griffin. The long confession over, Beckett is then driven south and Victorian police are alerted. He is driven over the border and to the Fiddler's Green Creek, where he leads the detectives to the girls' bodies.
And do you agree that we walked together through the bush and just across the creek and slightly upstream we came to an area where there's a large tree fallen across the river.
Yeah.
And beneath the root section of that tree in a portion of water was what appeared to be the remains of a deceased person.
Yes.
All right. And are you able to tell me now if that was the remains of the girl with the dark hair?
Yes.
Shane Box is among the police on hand to witness the tragic sight before returning immediately to Bega. He's become very close to the families since the girls disappeared, and he cries as he gives them the terrible news.
So probably the most difficult task a police officer could do would be to look the families of two young girls in the eyes and tell them that their girls were murdered, and that was the last they would ever see of them. And it was also especially hard for me as a father of two girls to be able to do that particular task.
My father pulled me aside and he said that they had found Lauren and Nicole's bodies, and I can't remember. My body's done a pretty good job of blocking out those emotions and feelings and thoughts at the time, but I was in a bit of shock, I guess. And that shock stayed with me for many years.
They came in their thousands to grieve, filling a small park. The town itself shut down as hearts opened and emotions overflowed.
Nicole and Lauren were my best friends I've ever had, and now that they've been taken away from me,
do not forget the impact of this terrible tragedy when it comes time for justice to be served.
The New South Wales detectives hand all the evidence to the Victorian police, who take carriage of the case under the direction of Detective Russell Sheether, who prepares the charges of murder. Beckett and Camilleri are extradited to Victoria, but charges of rape and sexual assault that occurred in New South Wales are held in reserve. Lindsay Beckett pleads guilty to the murders of Lauren and Nicole, and in August 1998, he's sentenced to 2 life terms with a non-parole period of 35 years. At the time, it's the longest non-parole period ever handed down in Victoria. Leslie Camilleri protests his innocence, blaming the murders on Beckett. His trial gets underway in February 1999 and lasts 10 weeks, during which more than 180 witnesses are called. Apart from Beckett's testimony, The most damning evidence is a match to Camilleri's DNA in semen on Lauren's clothes found by the roadside at Bega.
It puts Camilleri not only at the scene but being involved in sexual activity of which he'd continued and during court continued to deny.
There's also shocking testimony from a 19-year-old woman who was raped for hours by Camilleri and Beckett just days before they went to Bega. The star witness is Lindsay Beckett, and he lays bare all the repugnant detail of Lauren and Nicole's ordeal, detail which had previously been kept from their families.
Yeah, under your arms, come on. Of how the girls were made to do all sorts of horrible things, and then, you know, obviously, as you're hearing what your sister was made to do, and how she was raped and how she was tortured, those thoughts and images start coming up in your mind.
Shut up! I am sick of you whining, you stupid bitches.
And that obviously affects the body, and you get quite upset and angry and aggressive and lose control.
The long wait for the verdict is also distressing.
That was an extremely tense couple of days because the jury took, I think it was nearly 48 hours to give us a result.
Leslie Camilleri yawned repeatedly as he was branded a murderer by the jury.
When we heard he was guilty, I can remember my parents and Nicole's parents yelling, screaming yes and yelling for joy that which is hard to get some joy, but from all the stress and pressure we put through, it was a positive in a bad situation. It was a ray of light, I guess, that someone was going to be held responsible for the girls' murders.
Guilty. They were the best words I'd heard in this long trial.
Now maybe our girls can rest in peace, and we'd really like to thank the jury. They got it right.
It was the culmination of at that point, nearly 2 years of investigation and court processes.
The trial judge, Mr. Justice Vincent, made a dramatic statement at Camilleri's sentencing, which is still remembered years later by the homicide detectives who worked on the case.
You gotta kill him.
He said, however, I consider that my duty is clear. You are sentenced to imprisonment for life on each count without the possibility of release on parole. Through your actions, you have forfeited your right to walk among us again.
The case led to significant reforms because it exposed serious flaws in the bail and detention laws. Both killers had extensive criminal records, and yet they'd been released on bail just before the murders. 2 years later, Camilleri's appeal is dismissed, and he's refused permission to appeal to the High Court. The police receive high praise for their work in tracking down and successfully prosecuting the killers, especially from the people of Bega.
People were coming to the front counter just to thank us and sort of give their best wishes, you know.
Without the assistance, I believe, of both organisations, or all organisations, which is the New South Wales Police Force, Victoria Police, and also the Australian Federal Police from the ACT, this matter would not have been solved.
Being involved with the team that I met in Victoria and the exceptional way that they dealt with all of the evidence and you know, in some respect, did a more thorough job than I felt I could have done.
The police were amazing, especially Shane Box. They were there. They did everything they possibly could to comfort us, and but also sticking with their job at hand, which they have to do.
Life in the Bega district returns to normal.
It had a big effect on the children in the school and also the teachers, but particularly badly affected were the Year 12 students who had, of course, finished up their formal schooling.
They've changed people's lives forever. Everybody else who's left behind, everything's changed for them, you know. They have to live with this pain and the heartache for the rest of their life.
girls, eh?
Hey, girls. Me?
Nothing, there's no excuse. Doesn't matter how you're brought up. Have love or hatred or whatever, it's an individual choice. And doesn't matter how badly treated you are. I think these two were naturally born bad seeds. They were psychopaths. They got pleasure out of harming others. And they don't belong in our society.
Police are requesting any person having knowledge of Leslie Camilleri being in the Melbourne area or elsewhere in Victoria in the 1990s contact Crime Stoppers on 1800